The auditorium lights dimmed, and Marcus felt his heart stop. Not from the weight of his summa cum laude honor. Not from the pride radiating from his mother's tear-streaked face in the third row. But from the 8-second video now frozen on the massive projection screen behind the podium, his face, his body, his most vulnerable secret captured in devastating clarity. The graduation processional music cut out, replaced by a silence so complete Marcus could hear his own pulse thundering in his ears. 2,000 eyes turned toward him in unison. His hands went numb around the leather-bound diploma. This was supposed to be his triumph, the culmination of 4 years of relentless perfection. Instead, someone had just destroyed him in front of everyone who mattered. The question burned through his paralysis like acid: who did this? Marcus Anthony Hayes *** was born on August 12, 2001, in southeast Atlanta, Georgia, in a cramped bedroom above his grandmother's beauty salon where the smell of relaxer and bergamot oil had been his first memories. He'd entered the world during a thunderstorm that knocked out power to 3 city blocks, his mother always said, a boy born into darkness who'd spend his whole life chasing light. At 23, Marcus had become a masterpiece of calculated perfection. Valedictorian. Student body president. Howard University's golden son. His tailored navy suit fit like armor, his fade was crisp as a razor's edge, and his smile, that rehearsed, politician's smile, had disarmed admissions officers, scholarship committees, and anyone who might glimpse the fault lines beneath his polished surface. But Marcus lived in a cage of his own construction. The real him. The one who discovered Grindr at 17, who'd kissed another boy for the first time in a college bathroom stall, who'd recorded that video in a moment of reckless abandon, remained locked away like contraband. His family attended Greater Bethel Baptist Church 3 times a week. His father, Reverend David Hayes, born January 5, 1968, in Birmingham, Alabama, delivered sermons about biblical masculinity with the fervor of a man fighting demons only he could see. His mother, Patricia Hayes, born March 22, 1972, in Decatur, Georgia, taught Sunday school and spoke about homosexuality in whispered tones reserved for cancer diagnoses. Marcus had learned early, some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. His best friend since freshman orientation, Jasmine Nicole Turner, born June 18, 2001, in Prince George's County, Maryland, sat 3 rows behind his mother. Jasmine knew everything. She'd held him while he sobbed after his first hookup, had helped him delete dating apps before family visits, had promised his secret was safe. She was studying him now with an expression Marcus couldn't read, her usually warm brown eyes narrowed with something like suspicion, concern. He couldn't tell through his rising panic. The video had played for maybe 3 seconds before the AV tech killed it. But 3 seconds was enough. Marcus shirtless, laughing, reaching for the camera. The angle, the lighting, the intimate setting, there was no mistaking what kind of video it was. What he was. Dean Richardson, a silver-haired black woman who'd mentored Marcus since freshman year, rushed toward the podium, her burgundy graduation robes billowing. Technical difficulties, everyone. Please excuse, we'll resume in just a moment. Her voice carried the forced calm of someone performing triage. Marcus's legs remembered how to move. He descended the stage stairs in a fugue state, each step feeling like walking underwater. The whispers had already started, a low, serpentine hiss spreading through the auditorium like poison gas. He caught fragments. Was that really? Oh my God, did you see? His poor mother. He didn't look at his family. Couldn't. If he saw his father's face right now, he might shatter completely. Marcus's relationship with secrecy had been forged in childhood, tempered by adolescence, and perfected by necessity. He was 9 the first time he understood he was different. While his older brother DeAndre chased girls around the playground, Marcus found himself noticing his soccer teammates smile, the way sunlight caught in another boy's hair. The awareness came with immediate, crushing shame. Not because anyone had told him explicitly that these feelings were wrong, but because he'd absorbed the truth through osmosis. Through the way men at church praised strong young brothers, and side-eyed anything that deviated. Through his father's casual comments about sissies and punks. Through the rigid performance of black masculinity that surrounded him like atmosphere. By middle school, Marcus had learned to code switch his very existence. He dated girls he didn't want, laughed at homophobic jokes, and added an extra bass to his voice when his father was around. He became an actor so skilled he sometimes forgot which version was real. Howard University had promised freedom. In DC's historically black mecca of higher education, surrounded by brilliant, diverse black students from across the diaspora, Marcus had finally allowed himself to breathe. He'd found underground queer parties in Northeast. He'd joined a secret GroupMe for LGBTQ+ students who couldn't be out publicly. He'd met Darren Mitchell, born February 14, 2000, in Oakland, California, an art major with locks down to his shoulders and a smile that made Marcus's careful defenses crumble. Their relationship had lasted 7 months of stolen moments, late nights in Darren's off-campus apartment, careful distance in public spaces, the constant calculation of who might see them together. Darren had wanted more. Had wanted to hold hands in the quad, to post photos, to exist without apology. But Marcus couldn't. The stakes were too high. His father's church had funded his tuition when scholarships fell short. His reputation was currency he'd spent 4 years accumulating. Coming out wasn't just personal, it was financial suicide, familial exile, the destruction of everything he'd built. So he'd ended things. Told Darren he wasn't ready, might never be ready. Darren had cried, had called him a coward, had said Marcus would suffocate in his own closet. Then he'd left for a study abroad program in Ghana and they hadn't spoken since. That video, the one now burned into 2,000 retinas, had been recorded during their relationship. A private moment Marcus had insisted Darren delete. Darren had promised he would. Had sworn on everything. But someone had it now. Someone had weaponized his vulnerability and detonated it at the worst possible moment. Marcus locked himself in a bathroom stall in the campus center, his graduation gown bunched around him like a shroud. His phone vibrated with incoming messages, dozens of texts, Instagram notifications, missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He couldn't look. Couldn't process. His reflection in the toilet water showed a distorted, drowning version of himself. A knock on the stall door. Marcus? Baby, it's me. Open up. Jasmine. Her voice carried the careful gentleness reserved for approaching wounded animals. The weeks preceding graduation had been strange in ways Marcus had dismissed as pre-ceremony stress. His laptop had been acting glitchy, programs opening by themselves, that sense of someone having rifled through his things even though his door was locked. He'd blamed it on the aging MacBook, on his own paranoia. But there'd been other signs, subtle distortions in his carefully maintained reality. Jasmine had been pulling away. Their usual marathon phone calls had shortened to clipped exchanges. When he'd suggested their traditional Sunday brunch 2 weeks ago, she'd claimed she was swamped with her thesis. But he'd seen her Instagram story later that day, mimosas and waffles with sorority sisters she usually couldn't stand. When he'd confronted her, she'd gotten defensive in a way that felt wrong, scripted. "You're being paranoid," she'd said, but her eyes hadn't met his. Then there was the envelope. 3 days before graduation, Marcus had found a manila envelope slipped under his apartment door. No return address, no name. Inside, a single printed screenshot from a Grindr conversation he'd had months ago. Nothing explicitly incriminating, but someone was sending a message. Someone new. He'd texted Jasmine immediately, "Did you tell anyone?" "Tell anyone what?" She'd replied, too quickly. "You know what, asterisk. Marcus, why are you doing this?" "I would never, asterisk." But the doubt had already planted itself, a tumor growing in the space between them. Now, in the bathroom stall with Jasmine on the other side, Marcus felt that doubt metastasize. Why had she insisted on being at the AV booth earlier this week, claiming she wanted to help coordinate the graduation slideshow? Why had she been asking about his relationship with Darren suddenly, after months of never mentioning him? Why had her expression in the auditorium looked less like shock and more like expectation? Marcus, please. Let me explain. The words hit him like a physical blow. Explain, not, I can't believe this happened. Not, who would do this to you. But explain, a word that carried admission, guilt, foreknowledge. He opened the stall door slowly. Jasmine stood there in her graduation regalia, makeup smudged, hands twisted together. She'd been crying, but Marcus had learned not to trust tears. People cried for all kinds of reasons. Remorse. Manipulation. Relief at being caught. It was you, he said. Not a question. It's not what you think. Did you leak that video? Jasmine's face crumpled, but Marcus felt nothing. He'd gone cold, his emotions shut down like a house preparing for a hurricane. This was happening. His best friend, the person who'd held his darkest secrets, who'd promised unconditional love, had destroyed him. I didn't mean for it to be shown publicly, she said, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I sent it to the committee privately, Marcus, you have to understand. What committee? She flinched. The scholarship committee. For the Robinson Fellowship. The Robinson Fellowship. $100,000 for graduate school, awarded to the student who best embodied moral character and leadership excellence. Marcus had been the presumptive winner for months. He and Jasmine had both applied, but everyone knew he was the favorite. He'd written about his father's ministry, about servant leadership, about being a role model for young black men in the community. Understanding crashed over him in waves of nausea. You sent them the video to disqualify me. I sent them evidence that you weren't who you were pretending to be. Jasmine's voice rose, echoing off tile. You've been lying to everyone, Marcus. Living this double life while presenting yourself as this perfect Christian son. That fellowship was supposed to go to someone authentic, someone who. Someone like you. The words came out flat, dead. This was about money. It was about justice. Do you know how hard I've worked? How many times I've watched you glide through opportunities because you know how to perform respectability? Because you're willing to hide who you are. Her hands were shaking now, fury and justification warring across her features. I deserved that fellowship. I've never pretended to be something I'm not. Marcus wanted to scream, to hit something, to drag her into his pain until she drowned in it. But he couldn't move. His body had turned to stone, only his mind still functioning with terrible clarity. The committee wasn't supposed to show it publicly, Jasmine continued, her voice smaller now. I sent it to the fellowship director's private email with an anonymous note. I don't know how it ended up in the graduation presentation. Maybe someone else found it in the system, maybe. Stop. Marcus's voice came from somewhere deep in his chest, a register he didn't recognize. Stop making excuses. You weaponized my sexuality to destroy me. You took something I trusted you with and used it as a bomb. Nothing you say after that matters. Students were gathering outside the bathroom now, he could hear their voices, feel the weight of their attention. His phone kept buzzing. The world was watching his life implode in real time. Jasmine reached for him. He stepped back as if she were contaminated. Marcus, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think. You didn't think I was human enough to deserve privacy. You didn't think outing someone against their will was violence. He laughed, a harsh bark that hurt his throat. Or you did think it, and you decided your ambition mattered more. She had no answer. Her silence was its own confession. Marcus emerged from the bathroom to find his mother waiting in the hallway, surrounded by concerned faculty and gawking students. Patricia Hayes looked smaller than he'd ever seen her, a diminished version of the indomitable woman who'd raised him. Her face was wet with tears, but her expression held something Marcus couldn't immediately name. Not anger. Not exactly disappointment. Something more complex, more devastating. Fear. She was afraid of him now. Or afraid for him. The distinction felt meaningless. "Baby," she started. "Where's Dad?" Marcus interrupted. Patricia's eyes cut away. "He left. He said he had to go pray." Of course he did. Reverend David Hayes, confronted with evidence that his son was the very thing he'd spent decades condemning from the pulpit, had fled to God rather than face the human being in front of him. Marcus felt something inside him, some last fragile hope, finally snap. Over the next 72 hours, Marcus became a detective investigating his own destruction. He discovered that Jasmine had sent the video to Dr. Evelyn Robinson, director of the Fellowship Committee, from a burner email address 2 weeks before graduation. Dr. Robinson, scandalized and unsure how to proceed, had forwarded it to Howard's Ethics Committee. Someone on that committee, Marcus never learned who, had saved the file to a shared drive used by the graduation AV team. A student worker, likely rushing and careless, had accidentally included it in the graduation slideshow's media folder. A chain of institutional incompetence had turned Jasmine's targeted attack into public spectacle. But the deeper Marcus dug, the more complicated the picture became. He hacked into Jasmine's email. She'd always used the same password for everything, had trusted him with it during their friendship. What he found there unraveled his understanding of everything. Messages between Jasmine and her mother, who'd been laid off from her nursing job 6 months ago. The family was drowning in debt. Jasmine's younger sister had gotten into Spelman but couldn't afford tuition. The Robinson Fellowship wasn't just ambition for Jasmine, it was survival. More messages, these to a therapist Jasmine had been seeing since sophomore year. Years of resentment documented in clinical language. Feelings of inadequacy, of existing in Marcus's shadow, of watching him succeed through performance while she struggled despite authenticity. The therapist had apparently suggested Jasmine examine her complicated feelings about Marcus's privilege and her own internalized colorism and respectability politics. Marcus read until his eyes burned. He saw himself through Jasmine's gaze. The ways he'd unconsciously wielded proximity to heteronormative ideals as currency, how his ability to pass had opened doors that remained closed to her more obviously queer presentation. He'd never thought about it, had never had to. That was privilege too. But understanding someone's pain didn't excuse their violence. That was the truth Marcus had to hold simultaneously, Jasmine's legitimate grievances and her illegitimate response. Both could be true. Both were true. The revelation that redirected everything came on the 4th day after graduation. An email from Darren Mitchell, subject line, "I'm so sorry. Marcus, asterisk. I just heard what happened. I need you to know I didn't leak that video. I deleted it like I promised. But my ex-boyfriend got into my Google Drive last year after we broke up. He's vindictive and knows about you. I think he might have downloaded files and given them to someone at Howard. I have screenshots of him bragging about having dirt on closeted Howard boys. I can send them to you if you need proof for any legal stuff. I'm in Ghana until August, but I'll testify remotely if you need me to. You didn't deserve this. Nobody does. I hope you're okay, asterisk. D asterisk. Jasmine hadn't leaked the original video. She'd received it from someone else, someone connected to Darren's revenge-seeking ex, and had chosen to weaponize it rather than delete it. The web of betrayal was wider and more tangled than Marcus had imagined. He sat in his emptied apartment. His mother had packed his things while he was at the library, unable to face him, and understood that vengeance had no clear target. There was no single villain. Just hurt people hurting people, a cascade of wounds creating new wounds in an endless chain. The question wasn't just who leaked it. It was what Marcus would do with that answer. Marcus spent 3 weeks alone in a sublet studio in Northeast DC, away from campus, away from home. He didn't post on social media. Didn't return calls. He existed in a liminal space between his old life and whatever came next. He read Marcus Aurelius in those weeks, *Meditations*, the ancient Stoic text he'd studied in philosophy class but never truly absorbed. One passage lodged in his chest like a splinter. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus had spent his entire life trying to control outside events, his family's perception, his peers' opinions, his own narrative. He'd built an empire of control that had crumbled the moment someone else seized the levers. But his mind remained his own. His choices remained his own. He couldn't control that people knew now. But he could control what he did with that knowledge. Acceptance came slowly, painfully. Not acceptance of what Jasmine had done, that remained unforgivable. But acceptance that he'd been complicit in his own imprisonment. Every time he'd laughed at a homophobic joke to fit in, every girl he'd dated as camouflage, every moment he'd chosen comfort over truth, he betrayed himself before anyone else had the chance. Seneca wrote, "He who fears death will never do anything worth of a man who is alive." Marcus had been living in fear of a social death, and in doing so, had never truly lived. The transformation wasn't sudden or complete. But Marcus felt himself calcifying into something harder, clearer. The shame that had governed him began to transmute into something else. Not pride, that would come later, if at all. But a cold clarity about who he was and what he owed himself. He drafted an email to his father that went through 17 versions before he sent it. Dad, I'm gay. Not confused, not influenced, not broken. Just gay. I understand this changes how you see me. I understand you may need time, or may never be able to accept it. But I'm not apologizing anymore. Not to you, not to anyone. If you want a relationship with the son you actually have instead of the one you imagined, my door is open. If not, I'll grieve who we could have been and move forward anyway, I love you. But I love myself more now, Marcus Reverend David Hayes never replied. Marcus's mother did reach out, though. A text message 2 days after he'd sent the email, "Your father is processing. So am I. But you're still my son. Can we talk, They met for coffee in a neutral location. Patricia looked aged, worn down by weeks of upheaval. But she held Marcus's hands across the table and said, voice shaking, I don't understand this. I may never fully understand. But I'm your mother before I'm anything else. We're going to figure this out. It wasn't accepted. But it was a door left ajar. Marcus would take it. The confrontation Marcus had been avoiding finally became unavoidable when Jasmine requested to meet him 6 weeks after graduation. She'd been calling and texting throughout his isolation, messages ranging from defensive to apologetic to angry. He'd ignored all of them, focused on his own healing. But something in her latest message felt different. I've been meeting with a mediator from the campus LGBTQ+ center. They think it would be good for both of us to talk with a facilitator present. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to take accountability and understand the full weight of what I did. Please, Marcus didn't want to see her. The thought of sitting across from Jasmine, of letting her occupy his space again, made his skin crawl. But he'd learned from his Stoic readings, avoiding pain didn't eliminate it, only deferred it. And he had things he needed to say. He agreed to the meeting. The night before, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept replaying their friendship, orientation week when Jasmine had defended him against an older student's homophobic comment, the irony now was almost funny, late night studying in the library, the time she'd helped him rehearse his student government campaign speech 50 times until it was perfect. All those memories were now contaminated, retroactively poisoned by what came after. Or were they? Could a person contain both genuine love and terrible betrayal? Marcus was learning that humans were vast enough for contradiction. He prepared for the meeting like a soldier preparing for battle. Wrote down what he needed to say, practiced his breathing, reminded himself of his boundaries. He would listen. He would speak his truth. He would not accept performative apologies or explanations that centered Jasmine's pain over his own. He would not be moved by tears. The meeting room at the LGBTQ+ center was small, painted in calming greens and blues. A black non-binary mediator named Jordan sat between them, establishing ground rules. Jasmine looked different, hair cut short, makeup free, wearing a t-shirt from the NAACP instead of her usual polished aesthetic. She'd been crying before he arrived, her eyes were swollen. Marcus felt nothing. His emotional temperature was exactly 0 degrees. Jordan began, "Jasmine has requested this space to offer a fuller accounting of her actions and their impact. Marcus has agreed to listen, but is under no obligation to forgive or reconcile. This is about truth-telling, not forced healing. Jasmine, you have the floor." Jasmine's hands trembled as she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I want to start by saying I understand if you hate me. I hate myself most days." She looked up, and met Marcus's eyes for the first time. "What I did was cruel and calculated. I told myself it was about justice, about evening the playing field. But that was a lie I needed to believe so I didn't have to face what I was actually doing." Marcus remained silent, stone-faced. "I was jealous of you," Jasmine continued, words coming faster now, like lancing a wound. "From the day we met, I was jealous. You had this ease, this ability to move through spaces that rejected me. I'm dark-skinned, visibly queer, a woman. You were light-skinned, could pass as straight, male. Doors opened for you that stayed closed for me, even when my grades were better, my resume stronger. And I resented you for having access to a privilege you didn't even want. So you destroyed me because I wasn't oppressed enough for your taste." Marcus's voice was ice. "Because I had the audacity to survive in a homophobic family by staying closeted?" "No, I mean, yes, partially, but," Jasmine's composure fractured. "I was drowning, Marcus. My family was falling apart financially. My sister was going to lose her shot at college. That fellowship was everything, and I watched you about to take it while lying about who you were. It felt like theft. My closet wasn't a privilege. It was a prison I built to survive. I know that now. I didn't let myself see it then." Tears streamed down Jasmine's face. "I dehumanized you in my mind. Turned you into a symbol of everything that was unfair instead of seeing you as a whole person. And when I got that video from Darren's ex," Marcus interrupted. "I know. I figured it out." Jasmine nodded miserably. "He sent it to me anonymously at first, but then he reached out directly, said he had more, said he'd leak everything publicly if I didn't do something about the fraud at Howard. He wanted to hurt you, and I let him use me because part of me wanted the same thing." The room felt airless. Jordan intervened. "Marcus, would you like to respond?" Marcus had prepared a speech. Carefully crafted paragraphs about betrayal and violence and the particular cruelty of being outed. But sitting here now, across from this person who'd been his best friend and his destroyer, all those words dissolved. What came out was rawer, truer. You made a choice to prioritize your pain over mine. You saw me as competition instead of human. You took the most vulnerable part of me and weaponized it to advance yourself." His voice cracked, emotion finally breaking through. "Do you understand what you stole from me? Not just privacy. Not just dignity. You stole my right to tell my own story on my own terms. You took away my agency over the most fundamental part of my identity. I know. No, you don't know. You can't know. Because you chose your outness. You chose to be visible, to fight for space as you are. I didn't get to choose. You chose for me, and you chose violence. Marcus was standing now, unable to remain still. And the worst part? You did it using the tools of our oppressors. You wielded homophobia and privacy invasion like weapons, became the very thing we should have been fighting together. Jasmine was sobbing openly now. I'm so sorry. God, Marcus, I'm so fucking sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back what you took. Sorry doesn't undo my father's silence or my mother's fear or the 2,000 people who saw my most private moment. Sorry is the word you say when you accidentally step on someone's foot, not when you deliberately set their life on fire. The silence that followed was cavernous. Jordan spoke gently, Marcus, what do you need from this conversation? Marcus sat back down slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less devastating. I need her to understand that she doesn't get closure. She doesn't get to apologize and feel clean. What she did will live with both of us forever, and she has to carry that weight. I'm not here to absolve her. I'm here to make sure she truly comprehends what she's done. He turned to Jasmine directly. You wanted that fellowship so badly you were willing to destroy someone to get it. Did you get it? Jasmine shook her head. They withdrew my application. Said my actions showed ethical violations incompatible with the fellowship's values. Neither of us got it. Good, Marcus said, and meant it. Now you get to live with the fact that you compromised your integrity for nothing. That you betrayed someone who loved you, violated someone's privacy, participated in homophobic violence, and still lost everything you wanted. Maybe that's justice. Maybe that's just the universe showing you who you chose to become. The meeting ended without reconciliation. Marcus didn't shake Jasmine's hand, didn't accept her tearful attempts at a hug, didn't promise to forgive her someday. He simply left, walking out into the humid DC summer afternoon feeling both lighter and heavier than when he'd entered. In the weeks that followed, the legal and social consequences rippled outward like shock waves from an epicenter. Marcus consulted with a lawyer about pursuing charges against Darren's ex for distribution of intimate images without consent, a crime in DC. But the lawyer warned that prosecution would mean more exposure, more scrutiny, more of his life dissected in public. Marcus ultimately decided his energy was better spent rebuilding than seeking revenge through courts. Howard University issued a formal apology for the inadvertent display of private material and launched an investigation into their AV protocols. Dr. Robinson resigned from the fellowship committee, reportedly under pressure from the board. Jasmine was suspended from alumni networks and banned from campus recruitment. Marcus's social media became a battlefield he chose to abandon entirely. He deleted all his accounts, refusing to perform grief or healing for public consumption. Some classmates reached out with support, others disappeared from his life like morning fog. He learned who his real friends were by who stayed when staying was uncomfortable. His mother began attending PFLAG meetings in secret, hiding the pamphlets from her husband. She'd call Marcus every Sunday, conversations stilted and careful but present. She was trying. It was more than many queer kids got. His father remained silent. Marcus deferred his graduate school plans and took a job at an LGBTQ+ advocacy nonprofit in D.C., working with young black queer youth navigating family rejection. He found purpose in helping others through the darkness he'd endured. His boss, a trans woman named Monique who'd been out since the 90s, told him, "Sometimes we have to be the people we needed when we were younger." 6 months after graduation, Marcus ran into Jasmine at a metro station. They froze on opposite platforms, separated by train tracks. She raised her hand in tentative acknowledgement. He turned away. Not from cruelty, but from self-preservation. Some bridges, once burned, weren't meant to be rebuilt. A year later, Marcus sat in his apartment. A small one-bedroom in Columbia Heights, decorated with pride flags and African art and photos of chosen family. He was writing in the journal his therapist had recommended, processing the anniversary of that devastating day. The grief hadn't disappeared. It had simply changed shape, become something he carried rather than something that carried him. He still flinched sometimes when his phone notification sounded, still had nightmares about crowds staring at him. The trauma was a scar that would never fully fade. But he'd survived. More than that, he'd begun to live. Coming out had been violent and premature, stolen from him by malice and circumstance. But in the wreckage, Marcus had found a terrible freedom. He no longer had to maintain the exhausting performance of straightness. He dated openly, joined queer black organizations, spoke his truth without apology. The mask he'd worn for 23 years had been ripped off, and underneath he'd discovered someone worth knowing. Marcus thought often of the Stoic principle of amor fati, love of fate, acceptance of what is rather than what should be. He couldn't love what Jasmine had done. But he could accept that her betrayal had been the catalyst for his liberation. That his father's rejection had freed him from seeking approval he'd never receive. That the worst moment of his life had also been, in strange ways, the beginning of his truest one. He'd learned that forgiveness wasn't mandatory. That choosing peace didn't mean pretending violence hadn't occurred. That he could acknowledge Jasmine's humanity and pain while still refusing to absolve her actions. Both truths could exist simultaneously. Marcus had also learned that his sexuality wasn't his shame to carry. The shame belonged to the homophobia that had tried to cage him, to the people who'd weaponized his identity, to the systems that treated queerness as scandalous rather than sacred. He'd spent years internalizing poison that was never his to swallow. Now, when he looked in the mirror, he saw someone forged in fire. Harder and softer all at once. The polished perfection was gone, replaced by something more honest, a man learning to be himself, scars and all. This story raises questions that don't have easy answers. If you were Marcus, could you ever forgive Jasmine? Is there a difference between understanding someone's motivations and excusing their actions? When does survival strategy become complicity in our own oppression? And what about accountability? What does real accountability look like when someone has violated your privacy and dignity? Is legal justice the answer, or does healing require something the courts can't provide? For those of you who've navigated family rejection around your identity, who've been betrayed by people you trusted, who've had your privacy violated, how did you find your way through? How did you decide what forgiveness meant, if it meant anything at all? The comments section is a space for dialogue, not judgment. Share your thoughts, your experiences, your questions. Would you have handled things differently than Marcus? Have you ever been in Jasmine's position? So desperate for something that you compromised your values to get it? This conversation matters because these stories are happening in real communities, to real people, right now. LGBTQ+ youth of color face compounded vulnerabilities around privacy, family, and community belonging. By talking about it, by refusing to look away from the messy complexity of betrayal and healing, we create space for others to be seen. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more narratives that explore the intersection of identity, trauma, and transformation. Drop a comment about what resonated, what challenged you, what you're still processing. And if you know someone navigating their own coming out journey, especially if it wasn't on their terms, share this video. Let them know they're not alone in the aftermath. The healing isn't linear. But it's possible. That's the message Marcus would want you to take from his story. See you in the comments. Be gentle with each other.